Hi there, I'm Eitan and welcome back to the Wix Wiz. Today we're going to be talking about a brand new ecom SPI that Wix released, and it's right out of the oven. And this SPI allows you to run custom validations either in your cart or in your checkout in order to verify that people are checking out exactly like you want them to. So one classic example is what you see on the screen right here. So I have an example product and I have a minimum requirement of purchases before somebody can check out. So you have to buy, in this case, at least 10 of this example product in order to proceed to checkout. And you can see that there is an error message and that my checkout button is all grayed out, so I can't even proceed. And if I was to go ahead and add up to 10 of this example product, then the validation will run again, and now I can go ahead and check out my cart. So this is really versatile. You can do a lot more than just what I just showed you. And if you want to learn how to do that, you can follow along. Let me warn you that this is a brand new SPI. So this was also the first time that I was using this SPI in this tutorial. So if you don't enjoy tutorials where people are kind of making mistakes and getting messy, then this is not for you. But if you do want to follow along with me and come out at the end with a good foundation for how to use this SPI, let's get started. So in order to get started with this, you're going to need a Wix website with Wix stores installed, so that I have already set up here. And you're going to want to have dev mode on, of course. So the basics of setting up an SPI are done over here in the backend files. And you can see that there is a section called Custom Extensions. And what we're going to do is we're going to click this plus button right over here. And we are going to add this ecom validation SPI. So I'm going to go click that and click Start Now and accept the legal notice. And I'm going to give it a name. So this is just, let's say, called Validations, and add and edit code. And you can see here that in this section on the bottom, custom extensions, so we have two files that have been added in. So the first one is this validations config file. And the second one is this validations.js file. So the validations.js file is where we're going to write the logic behind our validation. And the validations.config file is really just a place where we need to return an empty object. Okay, so that's what's going to happen here inside of this getConfig file. So you just change this to return empty object and you're done. Now we can head over to our validations, and let's talk a little bit about how this get validations violations function is going to be structured. So I'm going to erase all of those instructions that are in there, and I'm going to open up this function just so we have a little room to write. So when this function runs, it comes automatically built in with two parameters. One is the options and the other is context. And this is all information regarding what triggered this function to run and what the state of our cart or checkout is when the function ran. So which line items we have in the cart, possibly some details about the buyer and the address, and you can go ahead and take a look at the documentation. I really recommend having this open so you can see here the get validation violations parameters, and here we have the options. So source, okay, what is the source of this request? So did it happen on the cart page or the checkout page or other? And here we have the validation info, so buyer details, line items, etc. Okay, different details about the current cart state or order state. Okay, and in terms of what we need to write in this function, you can write pretty much whatever logic you want, and we're going to show some examples soon. But what you need to do is you need to return this violations object. Okay, and this violation object is made up of four things. One is severity, the next is target, and, sorry, three things: severity, target, and description. Okay? And severity is how bad is this violation? So is it a warning or is it an error? And here there's just an explanation about what this implication means. So an error is displayed in red and doesn't allow the visitor to proceed, whereas yellow is just be careful, but you can still check out if you want. Okay. Target is where this is going to be displayed. So you can either display it in other area, so like a general area where these things are displayed, or with a specific line item, and we'll test out both of those options. And description is what they'll actually see in terms of the violation, so what it's going to tell them the problem is. And yeah, so let's go ahead and try setting up something like this. So the first example I want to try and do is to set up a situation where we need to have at least 3 different line items in our cart. Okay, so it could be that somebody is buying 200 of the same product. They still won't be able to check out. They have to have 3 unique line items, 3 unique products in their cart. That's the logic that I want to set up for my store. Again, you might have different logic, I imagine you do, but hopefully from these examples, you'll be able to implement this with your use case. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into the code, and what I'm going to need to get is the line items from the options. So if you remember, let's go back here to the documentation. So we had options, and then we had validation info, and then we had line items. Okay, so I'm going to say const line items equals to options dot validation info. And if I just put this inside of an object, then this will extract it from the validation info. So there we are, like that. And now I want to run my logic. So I'm going to say if line items dot length, because remember, line items is an array, is smaller than 3, then we are going to set up our warning. Okay, and I can set up the warning in advance. So we can do this over here. And it could be a warning or it could be an error, but we are going to have, so let's say const, and let's see what they called it over here. So this is called validation violation, returns validation violation. So let's call it that, okay? And this is going to be an array, okay? So make sure that this is an array. So I'm going to do const validation violations, and this is going to be an empty array. And now I'm going to create a new violation. So const items to few violation. Okay. And this is going to be equal to the violation. And this violation, as we said, it has to have 3 things. So the first thing is the severity. The second thing is going to be the target. And the third thing is going to be the description. So severity, let's put it for now as error. Okay, so this is something that will not let people continue to check out if they encounter this violation. And in terms of target, so I'm going to make it be the general warning in the other area. So I'm going to go over here and target. So it's going to be one of these two. So I'm going to do other, and then the name will be this, other default. Okay, so let's set that up over here. So the target will be other, and the name is going to be other default. And let's see what I did wrong. So this, okay, obviously this doesn't make any sense. Target, other, name. This is like that. Awesome. And then we just need our description. So I can write here, you need at least. And if I want to make my code just a little more scalable, so what I could do here is I can say const min items. And let's say that will equal to 3. And then here I can switch this out for min items. And this I can write as a template literal and write min items. And that way, if for some reason later on I decide that you need 4 items, then it'll be much easier and I can just change it over here and it'll change it in my entire code. And then what we're going to want to do is we're going to take the validation violations dot push and we're going to push in our items to few violation. So these are all of my validation violations. And what I want to do here is I'm going to return my validation violations. And if not, then we're essentially not going to be returning anything, and then this shouldn't run at all. Okay, so if we don't return validation violations, I think that we will not encounter a problem. So fingers crossed. One other thing we could have done differently is to push this over here. Okay, and this would make more sense in the case where we had multiple different violations that we were handling, and then we might only push those violations into the array based on a certain condition. So imagine that we had several conditions here, okay? And then we wouldn't return validation violations in each one, but we would just return violations here on the bottom. And based on the individual conditions, we would push in the specific violation. So if it's the min items, then we'll push this in. And if there's, some other condition, then we'll push in that violation. And then at the end, we'll return validation violations. So if none of the violations were crossed, then we'll just be returning an empty array, which should work the same as not returning anything. So let's leave it like this with this scalable approach. Okay, so this is a scalable approach. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try publishing this. You have to publish these to your live site in order to test them out. And I'm going to now go to my live site. So let's say view site. And I'm going to head over to the shop. And I'm going to add this product to the cart. Add to cart. And now I'm going to go to view cart. And I'm going to try and check out. Okay, we can't accept online orders right now, so that's a problem. But I shouldn't be able to do that anyways, because I want my violation to run here in the cart. But if you take a look at the documentation, okay, then it says that by default, it will run on checkout. And if you want to run this in the cart, then you're going to have to set validate in cart parameter to true in the custom extensions config file. Okay, so there is the config file where I told you that all you have to do is put in this empty object. What we can actually do here is actually pass in validate in cart and set this to true. And now our validations should run in the cart. So let's try that out. So I'm going to go ahead and publish this again. And I'm going to refresh my site on this cart page. And now I'm going to try clicking checkout again. Okay, so it did the same thing. Let's take a look at our logs. Okay, so I'm getting some errors here. So let's try, I'm going to hit checkout again. And let's take a look. The logs aren't running. Try it again. Okay, let me try publishing my site. Maybe that's when the log ran. Publish with the update to ecom validation. Okay. Awesome. Check out again. Okay, well, that's a little disappointing. It's a little disappointing that that doesn't run on a site without payments set up, because that's really hard to practice with and check. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move all the code that we wrote to another site that is connected to payments, and we'll pick it up from there. Okay, so welcome to my other site that does have payments. And what I've done is I've basically just copied the exact code files that we wrote on the other site into this ecom validations on this new site. So we have the validations.js and we have the validations config, and it's all set up. And I tried to go and do a checkout, and I did manage to recreate the error that we were seeing earlier that I caught a glimpse of on the other site but couldn't get to come up again. And that is that error something path message must be an object. So this is a very vague error message, but after taking a look at the documentation, I see here that when they returned their violations, they returned it as an object. So this is a little confusing because it doesn't say it over here. This says just array of violations, but I see it being returned here as an object. So that makes me think that that is likely the error that I'm having. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my validations.js file, and I'm just going to return this as an object. Sorry about that. That was because I'm actually trying out the new Wix Studios. And I was in one workspace, then I moved to another workspace for this other site, so it was throwing that weird error. But that aside, so here I'm also just going to rename this to be the exact name that they have over here, which is violations. Okay, because essentially this is going to be returning an object where the property is violations and the value is whatever's inside. So I'm just going to change that over here as well. So I'm going to call this violations, and up here this is going to be violations as well. Okay, and I'm going to publish this. And then I'm going to refresh my cart. And I'm going to try and check out. And it still let me check out, which is not what I wanted. Let's see. Okay, so we have a new error. And this time it is that, whoops, no, I do not want to exit OBS. Okay, and this time must be equal to one of the allowed values. So severity error. And let's see what the values are. So violations, severity needs to be a string. It is a string. And I did put it as error. So let's see, maybe I spelled severity wrong. That could be something that I would do. Oh, I spelled error wrong. Yeah, okay. Um, there we go. Okay. Happens. And let's refresh. I'm going to go back to the cart. And I'm going to refresh this. Boom. Okay, so we didn't even need to click checkout. It threw that error as soon as we went to cart. Okay, so here you see it says you need at least 3. Okay, so this is what the error looks like when it's an error, and you see I can't click checkout. So let's see what that would look like as a warning. So if I go here to the editor and I change this instead to warning, and go ahead and click publish, and refresh this page, then here you can see there's the warning. So I'm very sorry about this pop-up. It's because we have a new site, as you can see. So I'm just trying to redirect people from my old site to the new site. And here there's the warning, but it still does let me check out. Okay. And if I was to go back to my shop, and let's say I add this product to cart, and I go ahead and I add this product to cart, and example product 3 to cart. So now I have 3 different now I have 3 different products in my cart. So if I go ahead to view cart, then you can see that the warning goes away because we have 3 items. So we're essentially fulfilling the validation that we set up. Okay? So that's one example of validation. We could also do validation for a specific product. So let me show you that example because I think that that's something that you're likely going to want to see. So if I go into my products, so that would be inside of stores and then inside of products, and then I open up this collection, and I take, for example, this example product. So I'm going to need it to see what its ID is. So I'm going to go into Manage Fields and reveal the ID field. And I'm just going to copy the ID of this specific product. And now here I'm going to say const example product ID. And this will be equal to the ID that I just copied over. And now I'm going to add another violation. So this is going to be the const not enough example products. Okay, so let's say you have to have at least, let's say const min example products, and that equals to 10. Okay, so you need at least 10 of this example product, and that is going to be equal to an object. And let's say, let's reconstruct our violation. So the severity is going to be error, spelled correctly this time. And the target, we're going to practice the other target now. So instead of having it as other, we're going to use the line item one. So target, for some reason scroll stopped working on this page for me. So target, and then here we have line item. And then in line item, the name needs to be line item default. Okay, so here we're going to do line item. Is it line items or line item? Now I'm not so sure of myself. Line item, not plural. Line item, and here it's going to be name and line item default. At the moment, there's only these defaults, so I'm guessing that this is something Wix is planning on expanding on the future. Otherwise, it's kind of a convoluted setup. So that's probably somewhere on the horizon. And let's put in the description. And that is, let's also do a template literal. You need to buy at least min example products, example products. Okay, and then we can set up this logic here as well. So if, and now we need to basically filter our line items and see if one of them includes that product. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const example product equals to line items dot filter. And then for each item, what I'm going to check is if the item ID is equal to the the ID of that specific product. So let's just double check how these line items are set up. So options, validation, and line items, and ID is the line item ID, but what we want is the product ID. So inside of here we have product and original item name, site default optional. Okay, that's not it. Physical, item type, weight, price, billing, shipping, custom, applied discount. Where can we get the ID of the product? Line item ID. I don't think that that's the product ID. I think, let's see, they have a tutorial here. Line item ID. So I don't see anywhere else where there's an ID. So I'm going to start off with the assumption that that line item ID is the product ID. If it doesn't work for us, then we're going to backtrack and figure it out. So here we're going to say item dot ID equals to example product ID. And this is going to be an array still, because that's how filter works. So I'm going to add a 0 here to select, because we're only expecting this to filter down to 1 or 0. So I'm going to select the item that's at index 1 of this array, index 0 of this array. And that's going to be our example product if there's an example product. Okay, so I'm going to say if example product dot quantity is smaller than min example products, then we're going to push our violation, which is not enough example products. Okay, so here this is also illustrating what I said earlier about the case where we might want to push one or more violations. So here technically we can have two violations. So we could also have not enough items, and we could also have not enough example products, or we could have one or the other, or we could have no violations. Okay, and that's because of this way we set it up, that we push the violations based on if there is a violation or not. So let's go ahead and publish this and keep our fingers crossed, because there's a lot that can go wrong here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to refresh the cart page. And no. Okay, so awesome. It didn't work. I was expecting to see the violation over there. So let's check out our logs and see where this might have gone wrong. A missing string for keyword min length properties description. Okay, so maybe I spelled description wrong. That's an option. Awesome. Let's check it out. Description. No, it looks like I wrote description the same in both of them, so that looks right. Um, okay, so let's add in a log here. Let's see if we log console.log example product. Let's see if we're actually managing to select our example product. And I'm also going to add a log up here for line items. Yeah. Awesome. Let's try publishing that and trying that again. So I'm going to, going to refresh this. Awesome. Let's check out our logs. Okay, so here I see null. So that's probably our example product. Let's check out what we have over here. So here we have our line items, quantity, price, converted amount, formatted converted amount, ID. Yeah, so these IDs are not the IDs of the actual products. Catalog ID, item ID inside of catalog reference. I think that's the ID that we're looking for. Okay, so if we take a look over here, inside of the line items, we have catalog reference. And then here we have the catalog item ID. So this is, for example, product ID for Wix stores. Okay, so let's go over to this and change this. So this is not item.id, this is item.catalog. Oh my gosh, there's no way I'm going to manage to spell that correctly. Catalog reference. Copy that over. And that's going to be the catalog, the catalog item ID. Awesome. So let's go ahead and publish that. And let's give our cart page a refresh. I'm really happy that you guys are getting a lot of subliminal advertising for my new website. So if you haven't gone yet, you'll want to check out thewixwiz.com. And awesome. So it is not letting us check out. Okay, so that's cool. That's cool. So that it's kind of working, but it's not fully working. So because it's not displaying the error, I think that we must have made some kind of mistake. And when I say we, I mean I did. Um, with how we choose to display the error. So you remember the first time we kind of did the other option, and this time we did the line item option. So maybe I missed something in terms of how that is supposed to be set up. So if we go here, severity, target, and then here we have line item, and we're on the checkout page. Supported values line item default. The default location on a checkout page where the line item violation will be displayed. See image in the introduction. And ID. Okay, so this needs to be the ID of the line item containing the violation. So this is what I missed out. Okay, and this ID, I'm guessing, is not the product ID, but it's the cart, it's the line item ID. So the first ID that I was trying to use for the other thing is actually the ID that we need for here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some changes to the code. So what I'm going to do is first, we're going to do this example product filtering up here. And that way we'll have the example product in advance. And then what I can do is use that over here. So here we can have ID. And this is going to be our example product dot ID. And I think that that should do the trick. Let's try that out. So I'm going to go ahead and hit publish. And I'm going to refresh. Ta-da! Okay, so this is an example of thewixwiz.com. This is an example of how it will look if you have this inside of a specific line item. So we determined which line item it'll be in based on the ID of that line item. Remember, there's difference between the line item ID and the product ID. It's not the same thing. And here we're using the line item ID. Awesome. Yeah, so that's how you set it up. And then let's see what happens if I go above 10 here. 8, 9, 10. And then the error goes away and we can go and check out. Okay, so those are two examples of how we would set up like a general rule for our entire cart. So let's say you need at least 3 different items, and we set it up as a warning and it displayed here in the other area. So like the area, like that's a kind of a general warning for our entire cart. And we saw how to set up another kind of error, kind of validation that is specific to a specific product and how to display that right under that specific line item inside of the cart. So those are two examples of kind of how to set up a kind of classic validation. I want to take a moment and digress and talk about potential uses that are kind of outside of the box, but really have the option of adding a bunch of features that people might have wanted to add in the past that are not directly related to the cart, but are related to some kind of information that you want to get from the user before they proceed to checkout. So just for example, if I wanted to collect maybe a certain form that I want people to fill out before they check out, or I wanted to make them pick a certain date for delivery, or I wanted them to attach a document that they have to upload before checkout. Technically, we could also use this validation SPI in order to achieve something like that. So for example, if I have a date drop down here in my cart, and then when I run this validations SPI, I can query a certain database where that date is stored and check if that value exists or not. And if it does, awesome. And if it doesn't, we can throw an error and prevent the people from actually checking out. So this really opens a full door. I know this wasn't the intention of the builders of the SPI, but there is really a lot of potential for exploring different options. And let me know if that's something that interests you in the comments below, and maybe that can be a follow-up tutorial to this one. But yeah, I hope this gave you kind of a good introduction to the validation violations SPI. And yeah, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this every week. And I'll see you next time.